I acknowledge the honourable member, Amy Adams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'm rising tonight to take a call on the first reading of the Victims of Crime Reform Bill, which, as we've heard, sir, will amend the Victims' Rights Act. And it's interesting today, sir, that earlier this evening I was lucky enough to take a call on the Criminal Proceedings Reform and Modernisation Bill, and in that contribution, sir, I spoke about some of the steps that this government has taken to improve the lot of victims in our justice system. And so this bill really is another step along that path. And I think it's worth just going through that, because they really are part of a comprehensive package that National set out initially in opposition when we said if we had the privilege of becoming government, one of our key priorities was to ensure that the victims of crime, the people who are in the system through no fault of their own, are treated considerably better than they had been treated to that point. And so that's taken a number of steps. We've been busy addressing drivers of crime, and we've seen the success of that with the crime stats that have been released in the last few days, down 7% nationally, sir, and nearly 15% in Canterbury, I'm very pleased to say. So we've seen the offender levy come in, which the opposition derided as a meaningless gimmick, and yet, sir, a full 5 months ahead of schedule reached its first-year target. And as a result of that piece of legislation, victims are accessing right now real, meaningful services and support that they would not otherwise have had. Now that, sir, is a meaningful step to make victims' lives easier, that the Labour opposition derided, criticised and clearly opposed. Sir, the police safety orders have been put in place to ensure that our victims of domestic violence get on-the-spot protection as they need it, when they need it from the police, and we've improved access to and funding of restorative justice. And, sir, the last piece this evening that I mentioned earlier was to ensure that where we would reduce the cost and the time delays of being involved in the criminal court processes, because anyone who has been involved in that knows that that is tremendously stressful for victims of crime to have to relive the matter over and over again for months and months on end, while our criminal justice system grinds away to a slow, very slow outcome. So the next step is to look at the issues that this bill addresses. Issues of making sure that victims are far better involved in that court process as it's going through, to make sure that they are getting the information they need about the process, the proceedings, what's going on before the trial, what's happening during the trial, and of course at the other end, sir, what's happening when the convicted person may be put out on bail and during their sentences. And sir, it's ensuring that victims can involve themselves in those proceedings in a way that's more meaningful for them, particularly around reviewing the laws around victim impact statements. And so one of the parts that hasn't been talked about as much in some of the contributions tonight, but I think is very important, is requiring the establishment of a code for victims to ensure that in the future, when decisions are made in the justice system, the rights and the entitlements of victims are at the very centre of those decisions. I just have to say in closing, sir, that I find it quite ironic, really, that I've spent most of the past week as part of the Justice and Electoral Select Committee looking at the Video Surveillance Temporary Measures Bill. And as part of that that committee process, we have had certain parties in this House become very excised about the rights of offenders and making sure we looked after the rights of offenders. Well, sir, they do have a place, but I can tell this House that the rights that I'm far more interested in are the rights of the victims. And if it's a balancing act between the offender's rights under our system and the victim's rights, so my money is on the victim's rights every single time. I would far rather this House put its energies, its efforts and its passion into protecting the rights of victims every time, and I'm very happy to commend the bill.
Cool. Stuart Nash.